Hi, the following content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. If you are a healthcare provider, please consult with your affiliated institution or local ethics committee for ethical guidance related to clinical practice.
Welcome to Module 8. Take it away, David.
Hi, Russ. Thanks. So you may recall last time we talked about the basics of research ethics, and especially 3 requirements that are in practice the things that IRBs, institutional review boards, spend most of their time worrying about, which include the importance of obtaining voluntary informed consent, that risks are minimized and reasonable in relation to benefits, and that there be an equitable selection of research participants. That's really the bulk of what IRBs do when they're reviewing protocols. But there are other, and any research on human subjects, any new developments that are being done in biotechnology that involve human subjects research will have to meet those standards. However, there is an unusual situation that sometimes arises where the ethical requirements might arguably be even greater. And that's when it's not just routine research on human subjects, but something that's actually referred to as a major innovation. So when you are doing, I call this in some work that I've published, frontier research. When you're doing something that's a major innovation, there are arguably additional requirements in addition to the ones that are the regulatory requirements. So these are not regulatory requirements, but they are regarded widely as ethical requirements. And we'll talk about each of these requirements. There's 4 of them. First,
David, can I ask, are these codified or is this still an emerging best practice from the literature?
It's a little bit in between. So these were developed by Francis Moore, who was a very prominent surgeon, and it's become a basis of thinking about the ethics of innovation ever since Francis Moore's work.
How do you spell Moore?
Moore.
Okay. Francis Moore, for those who want to read more, but that's the one who has kind of started to put this into a codification.
And it is occasionally codified in different ways. So for example, I'm on the state's Human Stem Cell Research Advisory Committee, and I use these as the basis for human trials using embryonic cells derived from embryonic stem cells. So we use this framework for those regulations. So there are regulations here and there that that basically use these things for innovative areas.
Got it.
Okay, so 4 ethical requirements for innovation. 1, adequate scientific basis for the innovation. So you want to make sure that people know what they're doing. Second, that there be adequate institutional field strength, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. I'm going to talk about each of these things in more detail.
Go ahead.
Third, that there be a strong ethical climate of the institution in which the innovation is taking place. And then 4th, there needs to be professional and public discourse prior to the introduction of the major innovation. So let's go with each of these things in just a little bit more detail. So first, the scientific basis of the innovation. This is really the when is it ready for prime time problem. When is it okay to start to do something to humans and to put things into humans? This is a big debate going on right now around some challenge vaccine trials for vaccines for COVID-19. Usually you want to have a certain amount of evidence before you do this. Is it okay, given the tremendous social value, to cut those corners? And so the issue really is, at what point is the scientific basis ready to really do something that's really truly innovative? So what's the quality of the preclinical data? What kind of preclinical data do you have? Do you have higher animals, or is it just mouse or rat models? And we think about this both from the point of view of the evidence you have that the intervention is safe, so it's about safety, but then also about efficacy. And I just want to say one very important rule for research ethics that it's easy to forget, which is Rats and mice are not human.
Not
Yeah.
the same.
Yeah. It's easy to get caught up in enthusiasm about things on the basis of rat and mouse models. We can cure cancer in a lot of ways in rats and mice. So murine oncology is a great field, but very few of them actually translate over into humans.
That's right.
So then there's the institutional field strength. The idea here is that the places that are doing these innovations should be places that are really the ones who are ready for it, rather than places that are fly by night, or just, they may not really have everything that it takes to do this safely and effectively, but they want a race to be first. Sometimes this leads to heartache, in which people who are bad actors get rewarded. So Norm Shumway here at Stanford should have done the first heart transplant, because he was doing everything right to sort of systematically build up, but Debicki beat him out, and somebody who arguably should not have done that and didn't do it as safely or effectively or have as good an outcome because of that.
Now, where were they? Where was DeBakey?
I think that wasn't in South Africa.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So the idea behind institutional field strength is you want to think about the skill and experience of the team that are doing the innovation, including all of the relevant sciences, because you sometimes don't just need like a really skilled surgeon or a researcher with a great new technology who's an expert. You sometimes need other kinds of support, whether that's biostatistics, relevant clinical or surgical expertise, adequate psychological support. So you really want the whole gamut of what it takes to really be able to do this ethically. So no fly-by-night race to be first. That's the sort of short version. Then you also want to make sure that the ethical climate of the institution is strong, right? So you want to have a good, strong ethical climate institution. That includes adequate training in ethics for all the personnel. You want to make sure that you have adequate oversight, and you want to make sure that you have adequate monitoring.
I always find this one interesting because it's coming from the ethics community, and so you have a slight bit of potential conflict of interest.
Maybe, but I'll just say that the idea that there would be, I will say, first of all, the oversight and monitoring, people often get confused. For the most part, some of us play both sets of roles, but most ethicists who are involved in doing like ethics from an academic point of view are actually not involved in oversight, right? I'm the only person at our center, for all of our different faculty at the center that we have, the dozen or 15 people who are affiliated with the center, I'm the only one who's on the IRB.
Yeah, so that's a good response. It's not all about the ethicists, even though they're putting in some self-referential requirements. They won't necessarily be the ones doing it all.
And in fact, we have a very robust research ethics consult service, but it can't be that anybody who's involved in oversight or monitoring can be involved in providing those services. And then lastly, and this is another important one, you want to make sure that there are that both professional and public discourse takes place for the innovation, right? If you're going to take a major step forward, there needs to be both among professionals in the field discussion and a sense that it's an appropriate time to move forward in doing something in humans, so that it's not just, again, some group being an outlier and doing things that are inappropriate. You want to make sure that the community is ready for the step that's being taken. And then you also want to have some sense that there's been engagement with the public about the innovation to take place, and a sense of how the public is going to respond to it. So we are going to give you an example of this when we break you up into groups in the class session. I'll maybe just give I wasn't sure if I should do it or Russ, you should, but we wanted to just mention briefly the work of Dr. I think it's pronounced Dr. He, Dr. H.E.
Yeah.
Who did some very controversial work in China, in which he created embryos. What his goal was to try to help to couples who where the males had HIV, and they were worried about HIV transmission to offspring, and that's very stigmatizing there. And so he was offering to do CRISPR to their IVF-derived embryos to create embryos that were supposed to be HIV resistant, so that these men could have children without passing on or risk of passing on HIV to their offspring. It became controversial for a lot of reasons, and you'll talk about why you think it might have been ethically problematic in your groups in relation to the things that you've just learned, as well as in the readings. And but one of the things I just do want to point out about this is that there are other alternatives that are less technical, so sperm can be washed so that it doesn't pass on HIV, which is relevant to what's going to happen. Is there anything, Russ, that you want to talk about Dr. Ha in terms of details? Do you want to talk about, you're going to talk about off-target mutations in the next video, right?
Yeah, I will just mention that he was, he's often referred to as a Chinese scientist, and he's ethnically a Chinese, but he was trained at Stanford, and I was the chair of the department when he was training at Stanford. He wasn't doing this work. He left his postdoc and he went on to do this work. I think that's important because I don't want this to be a thing about blaming one country or one culture. It takes a village to create people doing stuff like this.
Yeah. So you'll be talking about that in your small groups in the class setting. I think that's a good place to stop.
All right, this will end the module. Thanks very much. See you all soon.